On Thursday, November 30th, the Russian Supreme Court outlawed the international public movement LGBT. They first invented this so-called international public movement as if it were some kind of a political party, and then they outlawed it. This is, without a doubt, a historical ruling, and it is symptomatic of the way late-stage Putinism is. This is a showcase of how a political campaign transformed into an ideology, into fascism. Let me remind you how it started. 10 years ago, in 2013, the Kremlin for the first time used homophobia as a political tool by banning gay propaganda among children. Back then, it was more of a PR trick designed to distract the nation from other pressing issues. Vladimir Putin's approval rating was in decline, and he wanted to shift the public's attention. Oh, you are dissatisfied with the government. Let's talk about LGBT instead. Divisive as it was, the gay propaganda law of 2013 was pure manipulation. It allowed the state pundits to move public debate away from Putin.
Я считаю, что штрафовать геев за пропаганду гомосексуализма среди подростков мало. Им нужно запретить донорство крови, спермы, а их сердца в случае автомобильной катастрофы зарывать в землю или сжигать как непригодные для продолжения чьей-либо жизни.
Of course, this homophobic campaign bore consequences. It worked as a green light for threats, firings, mistreatment, and violence. When pressed on this controversial legislation, Putin insisted his goal was to preserve social peace in Russia. Imagine if they had legalized gay marriage in Chechnya, he kept saying.
Я с трудом себе представляю, чтобы в Чечне вот это разрешили. Однополые браки. Но вы можете себе это представить? Вы понимаете, это просто до жертв бы дошло.
But that's exactly what started happening in a little while, after the homophobic legislation was introduced. The head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, started a full-scale campaign to eradicate homosexuality. In 2017, Novaya Gazeta published the horrifying reports on mass murders and torture of gay people in Chechnya. That was yesterday, and today, Putin took the next step. Now, 3 months before his re-election, he has put homophobia at the center of his political campaign, having banned any and all forms of self-expression or support of the LGBT community. Together with the fact that the government has also started an anti-abortion campaign, this is a showcase. Putin is stepping into familiar shoes. In the Third Reich, the legislation which prohibited any expression of homosexuality that, quote, objectively offended the societal sense of propriety was introduced in 1935. 1 year later, Heinrich Himmler created the Reich Central Office for the Combating of Homosexuality and Abortion. Now, what do you think the same type of institution will be called in Putin's Russia? My colleague Valeria Kirsanova on the Supreme Court ruling to outlaw LGBT.
Я здесь, потому что я против. Я здесь, потому что я против того, чтобы людей по признакам, которые они не выбирали, называли экстремистами. Они ничего плохого не делают.
Признать международное общественное движение ЛГБТ и его структурные подразделения экстремистскими и запретить их деятельность на территории Российской Федерации.
There are a few people outside of the courthouse, while inside a closed proceeding is underway with only one side present, the Ministry of Justice. Its representatives are wearing face masks, COVID restrictions.
The only people that usually tend to conceal their faces in the court of law are criminals, but not just regular criminals, but those that have committed extremely heinous crimes.
Even Kremlin propagandist and State Duma deputy Yevgeny Popov is baffled by the secrecy of this court case and struggles to understand what exactly became illegal. He ironically posed a rhetorical question: is LGBT a private enterprise or an LLC maybe?
All of this is doubly horrible in that we are unable to find out what the actual phrasing of the ruling is, which creates an atmosphere of fear, because people do not understand to what extent they are now allowed to be themselves, what the new restrictions are exactly, who they're allowed to talk to and who they're not allowed to talk to.
The answer to the question, what is LGBT, was found in an NTV broadcast. The program Emergency, ЧП, counted around 40 questionable organizations and hundreds of websites in Russia and called the fight for LGBT acceptance a front for supporting Ukraine.
Трансгендера и активиста задержали за то, что он переводил деньги на помощь украинским войскам. Позже стало известно, подозреваемый, превратившийся из женщины в мужчину, являлся волонтером правозащитного центра, признанного иностранным агентом.
Это ведь объявленный враг.
It's a declared enemy of the state. The fight against this enemy is the explanation that the president and other officials give for starting the war, for example.
Every news broadcast and all state-owned media completely ignored the Supreme Court's ruling. They discussed the upcoming direct line with Vladimir Putin, the annual broadcast where the president is supposed to answer the Russians' questions. According to Putin's press secretary Peskov, the president was not following the LGBT case. Political talk shows on state television rushed to assure viewers that there is no LGBT discrimination in Russia.
Кого запретили, что с ним будем делать дальше?
Никого, а что? В том-то и дело, что кого никого не запретили. Никаких конкретных граждан не запретили, и ни по чьим правам это не ударяет.
In reality, no one is multiple million people. Attorneys and rights advocates are certain that this legislation will be interpreted very loosely and lead to abuses of power on the part of law enforcement.
Я сбежал из конверсионного лагеря чуть больше полугода назад. Меня похитили. Меня год пытались излечить от того, что мне пытались убедить, что я не транс-женщина. У них это не получилось. Де-факто, если сейчас с принятием данного иска, я не смогу говорить о конверсионной терапии. Мне запретят, потому что это будет связано с ЛГБТ-темой.
Other people should also take this legislation to mean that there are no boundaries that the Russian government isn't willing to cross. Everyone should reflect on the fact that this is a legislation of hate speech and other forms of violence against the LGBT community.
This means that you can't live openly and, for example, invite your colleagues from work over to your house because you live with a partner of the same gender as you. You can't speak openly in front of relatives, colleagues, friends, because no one knows what will be considered propaganda and what will qualify as participating in extremist activities.
Участием в экстремистской организации и так далее.
Moscow gay clubs are already ceasing being LGBT exclusive to avoid persecution. The St. Petersburg club's central station closed down completely. People are ready to flee Russia as soon as possible.
В нашу конкретную юридическую службу.
Our legal division has received 1.5 times more inquiries regarding immigration this week. That quantity has been extremely high as it is in the last year and a half. Now we're seeing a real barrage of inquiries.
Сейчас мы видим прям вал запросов от людей.
Мы, мягко говоря, здесь не нужны. Все наше дальнейшее здесь нахождение это будет преступление. И единственный сейчас вариант, именно актуальный для многих сейчас квир-действий, это уехать. Многим либо оставаться в стелсе, что является сродни мазохизму.
Even though the Supreme Court ruling legally takes effect only on January 10th, 2024, Moscow police have already commenced raids on gay clubs and even saunas. The police claim to have been searching for illegal drug use.
TV Rain is on the air. For 12 years, we remained the only independent news channel in Russia. We had to leave, forced out of the country by new repressive laws after the first week of the war. Our freedom crushed by the authorities.
Мы приняли решение, что мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We have operated as a European company from Europe and now also broadcast in English.
Kherson has surrendered.
Russia's propaganda targets have changed.
Putin cries havoc. We want to tell you firsthand what is really happening in Russia. Subscribe to TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube and let's take a look at our future together.